After Kevin's infidelity, the mistress he kept outside sent me a video. A man, disheveled and exhausted, carefully took a newborn from the doctor's hands, his face glowing with the joy of becoming a father for the first time. Expressionless, I turned off my phone, my thoughts drifting to the daughter, who was already a year old and living abroad. I sent her father a message. Bring her back. Kevin's mistress was about to give birth. He received the call while we were out celebrating our 5-year wedding anniversary. Kevin, I'm about to have the baby. From the other end of the line came the suppressed groans of a woman in labor. Kevin instinctively stood up, his tone a mixture of tension and the polished demeanor he never dropped. How did it happen early? Hold on. I'll be there soon. I set down my fork and looked at him quizzically. Who was that? A flash of panic crossed Kevin's face, but he quickly regained his composure. Jane, sorry, there's an urgent issue at work. I'll have my assistant drive you home later. With just those few words, Kevin walked out without looking back. Watching his retreating figure, I unlocked my phone, and on the screen was a message from the mistress he had kept hidden. Miss Garcia, I'm the woman your husband has been keeping outside. I'm about to give birth. So, will Kevin stay with you or come to the hospital for me? The taunting tone revealed her smug confidence in her victory. I closed my phone, indifferent to the message. After all, I had known about Kevin's infidelity for some time, including the mistress he had been supporting. As for the child, a mere illegitimate one, Kevin and I were bound by a business marriage. The union of our family's interests left no room for genuine affection between us. Adding to this was the 7-year age gap, which made me wary of him from the start. After our marriage, we stayed out of each other's way, waiting for the 3-year agreement to expire before ending the union. But no one could have predicted that after a year of mutual respect, feelings would unexpectedly develop between Kevin and me. It felt like something out of a cliché, melodramatic novel. Kevin and I fell in love after marriage. He was courteous, gentle, and respectful, always considerate. Even though ours was only a contractual relationship, he was mature, composed, and meticulous, patiently teaching me life's intricacies one step at a time. He was charming, elegant, and calm, always showing up when I needed him most. And so, my heart gradually fell into the gentle trap he had set. Until the first snowfall in City A, he took me to the city's tallest skyscraper and arranged for 3 continuous hours of fireworks just for me. Beneath the dazzling display, Kevin knelt on one knee. The glow of the fireworks outlined his features, reflecting the small, adoring version of myself in his pupils. He said, Jane, from today onwards, let's be a real husband and wife, shall we? Our shared past had blurred into obscurity, but that moment was forever etched into my memory. Yet no matter how beautiful the memory or solemn the vow, it all meant nothing in the face of a man's betrayal. Knowing Kevin wouldn't return that night, I left the restaurant and went to a villa I owned in City 8. The villa, regularly cleaned, had become my refuge when Kevin didn't come home. He had no idea I owned this property. I thought the mistress would behave herself after giving birth, but late that night, she sent me a video. I in the video. Kevin, looking haggard yet radiant, carefully took the baby from the doctor's hands. His gentle and warm expression was lit with the unrestrained joy of new fatherhood. For the first time, I saw Kevin wear that look. Did he truly love children? I wasn't sure. During our sweetest moments, I had once asked Kevin if he wanted children. He hadn't responded, leaving me to chatter away by myself. In the end, I never got an answer. Now, years later, the answer was in front of me. Kevin liked children, but only the ones born to his true love, the mistress. Kevin had always carried a torch for. A lost love, a white moonlight. It wasn't until after discovering his affair that I learned about her. How laughable. I had once believed Kevin loved me. Why else would he carry me through the snow, circling the yard countless times despite his soaked shoes, just to build me a snowman? Why else would he buy every billboard in the city on my birthday, lighting up the night sky with fireworks for me alone? Why else would he pray fervently for my recovery when I was bedridden with a fever? His actions made me feel like a pampered child, free to indulge in his love without restraint. But later, someone told me Kevin had done all these things for someone else before, What I thought was unique and special was merely Kevin recreating memories of a love that had once left him heartbroken. I was a clown, thinking I was wrapped in happiness when it was all a cruel joke. Expressionless, I turned off my phone. My once turbulent emotions had long since settled into stillness. From the moment I discovered Kevin's affair, the Jane Garcia who had loved him had ceased to exist. It was an accident that revealed Kevin's infidelity. Before our marriage, he used to volunteer at a stray cat shelter once a month. When I asked if it was because he liked cats, he didn't deny it. But after learning I was allergic to cat fur, he never went back. In our third year of marriage, I was hospitalized for an allergic reaction. Tests revealed cat fur as the trigger. The house staff knew about my allergy, so it was unlikely they'd be careless. And the only person close enough to me to carry cat fur was Kevin. But he knew I was allergic. Perhaps it was intuition. But I hired someone to investigate Kevin. When the private investigator placed the photos before me, I almost couldn't connect. The man in the images, smiling gently and brimming with love. To my husband, Kevin, he looked so happy, radiating the joy of something long lost and finally regained, nuzzling the woman's cheek and nose, holding her as if he could never let go. They kissed passionately, their fingers intertwined, the love between them so intense it spilled over. I had never seen Kevin with such strong emotions. Even when he kissed me, it was always soft and restrained. And the most ridiculous part, Kevin had been seeing Linda since her return and had even adopted a stray cat with her. In that moment, I felt an unprecedented wave of disgust. I dug deep into Kevin and Linda's past. Even though Kevin tried to cover his tracks, I still uncovered plenty. The golden boy falling for a poor girl, only to be torn apart by their families. How cliché. And yet, it only made me feel like more of a fool. I tortured myself by going through their history over and over again. And oh wonder Kevin never talked about his past relationships. And oh wonder he always seemed so calm and self-assured. His sincerity, his passion, his impulsive nature. He had given all of that, without reservation, to someone else. What he left me with was nothing but fleeting, false affection. But why bother with me at all? Why keep me in the dark, making me endure betrayal after betrayal? I stayed in the room for a day and a night. When Kevin finally returned, he acted like nothing had happened. Seeing the exhaustion on my face, he even reached out, concerned, to touch my forehead. "Jane, what's wrong?" The once gentle, composed face now looked twisted and horrifying to me. I couldn't understand how he could remain so at ease, acting like nothing was wrong. The anger within me screamed for me to confront him, to tear down his facade. I wanted to claw at his face, to make him see how deceitful and disgusting he truly was, but I knew I couldn't. Why should the one who gave their heart be the one betrayed? Why should I be left to lick my wounds alone? Why should the one who wronged others get away unscathed? From the beginning, the only one at fault was Kevin. I unlocked my phone again. The screen lit up with a picture of a little mixed-race girl wearing a tiny birthday hat. My heart softened. After a long pause, I sent a message to someone I had saved as Q. Not long after, a call came through from overseas. The first thing I heard was the soft, sweet voice of a little girl. "Hello, Ma." Ma. Then, a tall man appeared on the screen, holding a tiny bundle in his arms. My heart melted instantly. It had been a while since I last saw Jessica. She'd gained some weight, her face now plump and fair, with a head of soft curls that made her look like a sweet little dumpling. Ignoring the man beside her, I focused all my attention on making Jessica laugh. It wasn't until the man tapped the screen with his finger, tilting the camera toward himself, that I reluctantly pulled my gaze away. "What do you mean by bringing Jessica back?" The man, Jason, wore nothing but a loosely tied bathrobe, revealing his broad chest. Without batting an eye, I replied, "I miss her. And Kevin's mistress just gave birth. It's time to settle some scores." Jason frowned slightly, as though lost in thought. After a moment, the sharp angles of his features softened. "And do you want me to come back too, BB?" Jason was mixed race and had spent time in Hong Kong years ago. He loved using Cantonese slang when addressing me. BB from his lips sounded sultry and intimate, paired with those jewel-like green eyes of his. It was hard not to get lost in them. I averted my gaze, glancing at the loosely tied robe before me. Focus. We're talking business. Jason chuckled lowly, saying nothing, before turning the camera back to Jessica, who had fallen asleep. Jessica, she misses you. I do too. His voice was soft as he murmured the last part. I paused but didn't dwell on it. After hanging up, I switched to another account and opened Kevin's WeChat. Half an hour earlier, he had posted a status update. Welcome to the world, my son. 6 pounds, 8 ounces. Thank you for your hard work. The post included a picture of the newborn clutching his finger and another of 2 hands intertwined. The comments below were filled with congratulations, mostly from Kevin and Linda's mutual friends, and I didn't believe for a second that they were unaware Kevin was married. But the fact they could still congratulate him so shamelessly was laughable, and Kevin, he was rotten to the core. Not only had he fathered an illegitimate child with Linda, but he'd also gone to great lengths to hide his affair from me, and no matter how poised he appeared on the surface, he couldn't erase the inherent flaws of his character. How ironic. All the love I had given was wasted on someone unworthy. Suppressing my disgust, I left a comment beneath Kevin's post, mimicking the others. After hitting send, I immediately closed the app, unwilling to let my eyes linger on it for another second. Kevin returned 5 days later, having received a tip-off from his assistant. I made sure to be home. He walked in looking visibly worn, his fatigue plain to see. Yet beneath it all, there was an unmistakable joy. I marveled at how he could manage to return so soon after being with his mistress and child. Feigning curiosity, I teased him. What's the happy occasion? Kevin merely smiled and said nothing. I tended to the flowers. I wondered how he planned to deal with the mother and child outside. Divorce was out of the question. Our family's interests were now too intertwined. Years ago, it might have been easier to part ways. Kevin must have known that too. Otherwise, he wouldn't have allowed Linda to give birth without a name or title. How ironic. Before marrying Kevin, I was nothing more than a tool for my family's business alliances. It was Kevin who taught me how to navigate the complexities of life, who helped me secure a place in the Garcia group. Did Kevin ever love me back then? No. He simply wanted a wife who matched his status, and I, foolishly, gave him my heart. But true feelings are the easiest to betray. To someone like Kevin, what he can't have will always be the most desirable. As for Linda, she wasn't innocent either. Why else would she have secretly messaged me to provoke me? She wanted me to see the evidence of Kevin's infidelity, to break my heart and force me to back down, but it wasn't going to be that easy. I had invested my time, energy, and heart into this. Kevin's meager offerings could never make up for that. After composing myself, Kevin returned to his usual polite and gentle demeanor. He hesitated before speaking. Jane, I looked up, curious about what he was going to say. I have a friend who recently had a baby. Before he could finish, I interrupted, half serious and half joking. Stop right there. I read online that whenever someone says, I have a friend, they're actually talking about themselves. I trailed off, drawing out the last word. Kevin, you're not talking about yourself, are you? Kevin's face remained composed, without a hint of panic. He smiled, walked over, and gently wrapped me in his arms. His voice was soft, almost tender. How could that be? It's just my friend's wife recently gave birth, but they were in a car accident on their way home. Before passing, he entrusted me with the baby, asking me to adopt him. If you don't want to, I'll respect your decision. I scoffed inwardly. Kevin had truly outdone himself with such a convoluted excuse, inventing an elaborate backstory for his illegitimate child. Since divorce wasn't an option for him, and the child needed a legitimate status, Kevin had turned his sights on me. He wanted me to adopt the child and raise him as my own. Even if I discovered the truth later, it would already be set in stone. His illegitimate child would officially be recognized as an heir. Kevin was brimming with confidence. He was certain I loved him so much that no matter the reason, I wouldn't leave him. After all, the poised, composed Jane Garcia was his own creation. I loved him to my core. How could I possibly leave? I didn't answer his suggestion directly. Instead, I reached out, wrapping my arms around him and speaking seriously. Kevin, are you saying you want a child? Then, feigning contemplation, I pointed to the fine lines near his eyes. It makes sense. You're getting older. It's my fault for not wanting kids these past couple of years. How about we try for one? A biological child would be better than adopting one. After all, people always say adopted children are ungrateful. What if the one we adopt turns out to be a white-eyed wolf? After learning about Kevin's infidelity, I never let him touch me again, mostly out of concern for diseases. My excuse was, naturally, not wanting children. With our busy schedules and Linda monopolizing his time, it wasn't hard to explain away our lack of intimacy. Kevin's expression visibly stiffened. He pulled me closer, unusually patient as he defended his illegitimate child. Jane, I know you don't want kids. I don't want you to go through the pain of childbirth either. If we adopt this child, all our problems will be solved. I promise you, he won't be like those ungrateful kids you mentioned. I didn't respond, gently pushing him away. My tone turned playful, almost teasing. Kevin, you're awfully protective of this child. Could it be he's your illegitimate son from outside? Kevin's expression didn't falter. Beneath his calm demeanor was an air of unwavering confidence. Jane, don't you trust me? In the past, if Kevin had said this, I wouldn't have doubted him for a second. But now? Kevin, how can I trust you? I burst into laughter, shattering the tense atmosphere. All right, I'm just joking. I've always trusted you. Once I let it go, Kevin wasted no time leaving the villa. His assistant sent me a message shortly after. Madam, Mr. Smith is on his way to pick up the child. After uncovering Kevin's affair, I paid a hefty sum to turn his personal assistant against him. Thanks to this, I had access to Kevin's private social media accounts and could monitor his movements with Linda. It seemed Kevin cared about the child even more than I thought. But what about Linda? Would she willingly let me adopt her child? As it turned out, she wouldn't. When Kevin brought the child home, his assistant updated me again. Madam, Mr. Smith has also brought Ms. Linda Miller back with him. She's currently staying at his private residence, but it seems the two had a heated argument on the way. I wasn't surprised by this revelation, and no one would willingly give their child away, especially not someone like Linda. I had looked into her background. She was a proud and ambitious woman who hadn't dated anyone since breaking up with Kevin. Perhaps she believed Kevin only loved her. Confident in this belief, she had left the country without looking back, but what she hadn't expected was Kevin marrying me and the frequent displays of affection we flaunted online. Unable to endure it, she caved. She returned to the country without hesitation, willing to shoulder the label of a mistress to rekindle her relationship with Kevin. I curled my lips into a smile, sent a message to the assistant, and began looking forward to the scene of Kevin bringing the child home. Jason arrived at the villa from the airport before Kevin did, standing at the door with a baby strapped to his chest and a large suitcase in hand. He greeted me. I took Jessica from him, feeling the comforting weight of her little body, and affectionately nuzzled her soft cheek. Jessica, did you miss me? Perhaps it had been too long since we last saw each other. Jessica's lips trembled, and those green eyes, so much like her father's, filled with tears. I quickly comforted her. Oh no, it's my fault. I made Jessica sad. Jason knelt down, speaking to Jessica gently, as if he were completely at home. Be good, baby. Jessica finally calmed down, reaching out her tiny arms. Hug. Kevin walked in just as I was playing with Jessica. He froze at the sight of another child in the house, his expression blank. Even the cries of the baby in his arms didn't snap him out of his stupor. Jessica, startled by the commotion, stumbled and threw herself into my arms. Scared. Her cries quickly drew Jason from the kitchen, where he had been making milk for her. He hurried over, milk bottle in hand. His sharp green eyes briefly landed on Kevin and the child in his arms before shifting away indifferently. Jason tightened the bottle's cap, crouched down, and used it to distract Jessica. Jessica, look. What's this? Come to Daddy. Kevin's gaze darkened instantly. He approached me, his eyes shifting between Jason and me with growing suspicion. After a long pause, he managed to ask, Jane, who are they? Feigning exasperation, I playfully rolled my eyes at him. Didn't you say you wanted to adopt a child? I don't have any experience raising kids, but I know someone who does. So, I asked him to come over. Besides, Kevin, don't you think? I pointed at Jessica, who was sitting in Jason's arms. drinking milk. A faint smile tugged at my lips. Do her eyes and lips resemble mine? Kevin asked suspiciously, glancing between Jason and Jessica. Jane, since when did you have friends I don't know about? I shrugged. He's a business partner of mine. This is his daughter, Jessica. I wish I could have a daughter like her too. My words carried a hint of undisguised longing. Kevin immediately went on high alert, scrutinizing Jessica closely before shaking his head. Jane, I don't think she looks much like you. Jessica didn't resemble me, of course. She took after Jason. After saying that, Kevin turned to Jason, extending his hand. Hello, I'm Jane's husband, Kevin. Jason didn't respond verbally, merely giving a polite nod with an air of indifference. Kevin looked a bit awkward but tried his best to make conversation. Your daughter is very beautiful, but where's her mother? This time, Jason finally reacted. Holding Jessica in his arms, he gave me a fleeting glance. I smirked, letting my gaze drift. Jason lowered his head, gently coaxing Jessica. Jessica, tell Uncle where your mommy is. At the mention of mommy, Jessica immediately turned to me, reaching out with her tiny hands and mumbling, Mom, Mom? I curved my lips into a smile, feigning surprise as I responded, Oh yes, Mommy's here. Kevin appeared visibly shaken, as though jolted by her words. Reflexively, he said, Children shouldn't call someone else mommy so casually. He quickly stepped forward, shielding me with the child in his arms. His urgency was almost frantic as he gestured for me to look at the baby. I glanced at the child, briefly teasing him with my finger. Kevin was elated. Look at him. Isn't he adorable? He began enthusiastically praising the child, his joy and pride as a new father shining through without restraint. I withdrew my hand, feigning disinterest, and said matter-of-factly, Since you're so happy, let's adopt him. How about we throw a party tomorrow to celebrate? Kevin seemed taken aback by my swift agreement, pausing for a moment before breaking into a smile. All right, let's do as Jane suggests. Kevin organized an extravagant event, inviting nearly every influential figure in the city. He mingled through the crowd with the child in his arms, brimming with confidence and charm. Some ladies seemed to sense something amiss and kindly pulled me aside to warn me, Ms. Garcia, your husband seems exceptionally attentive to this child. I sipped my wine and smiled faintly. Oh, that's because this child belongs to Kevin's friend. He's also the future heir of the Smith Group. Since we've adopted him, of course, we'll take special care of him. The women exchanged disheartened looks and shook their heads, pity written all over their faces. I inwardly sneered. Pity me for what? For having a cheating husband? For being the legitimate wife cluelessly adopting his illegitimate child? In truth, I should thank Kevin. It was he who led me into the ruthless world of business and taught me how to consolidate power in my hands. It was he who polished me into the sharpest weapon. I still remember the day I fully took control of the Garcia Group. The thrill of holding absolute power far surpassed the fleeting satisfaction of love. Once you possess enough status, influence, and authority, all other superficialities fade into irrelevance. And so, those women didn't call me Mrs. Smith. I owed it all to Kevin. Now, I had a grand gift in store to repay him. As Kevin held the child and delivered a speech on stage, Jason approached me with Jessica in his arms. I took her, cradling her gently as I played with her. The ladies around us noticed Jessica and exchanged uncertain glances. Ms. Garcia, this little girl, I smiled, deliberately. Teasing. Looks a bit like me, doesn't she? I had voiced what they didn't dare to say. Then, I tickled Jessica playfully. I wish I had such an adorable daughter. Unfortunately, it seems that's a wish that won't come true. At that moment, a sharp voice cut through the air behind me. Kevin, who do you intend to let raise our child? It was Linda, dressed elegantly. Her pale face bore an exhaustion that even makeup couldn't hide. The crowd parted to let her through. Even in her disheveled state, she straightened her back with determination. She glared at Kevin, her stunning face distorted with anger. I risked my life to give birth to our child. You promised to divorce her and give me my rightful place. You lied to me. She screamed hysterically, but Kevin, standing on the stage, remained unnervingly calm. He motioned for security and mercilessly ordered her removal. "Who let this lunatic in? Get her out of here immediately." In that moment, I realized Kevin didn't love Linda as much as I'd thought. His so-called love hinged entirely on preserving his reputation as a good husband and protecting his personal interests. As soon as anyone threatened his carefully constructed facade, even someone like Linda, the woman he supposedly couldn't let go, he discarded them without hesitation. While the two argued, murmurs spread through the crowd below. Jason took Jessica from my arms. Discreetly brushing his pinky against my palm, I smiled faintly, acting as though nothing had happened, calmly. Retracting my hand, Kevin's expression grew colder, his impatience more apparent. From his elevated position, he cast a disdainful gaze at Linda, his eyes full of warning. Linda staggered, seemingly unable to believe the cruelty of the man she had once loved so deeply. She collapsed weakly to the floor. I exhaled slowly. The show wasn't over yet. I sent a message to my bodyguards, and suddenly, the large screen at the banquet began displaying photo after photo of Kevin's infidelity. The murmurs turned into a roar. Reporters, previously scattered and hesitant, surged forward as, though injected with adrenaline, raising their cameras in a frenzy. "Mr. Smith, could you explain the child in your arms?" "Mr. Smith, does Mrs. Smith know about your affair?" "Mr. Smith, care to comment on these allegations?" Watching Kevin surrounded by a horde of reporters, I smirked and turned to leave. When Kevin returned, he was a disheveled mess. I sat calmly on the living room sofa, showing no anger, no accusations, and no frustration. I simply pushed the divorce papers across the table toward him. "You cheated," I said evenly. "Let's get divorced." Kevin opened his mouth, but no words came out. Instead, he pushed the papers back toward me. "Jane, I'm not divorcing you." Of course, Kevin wouldn't choose divorce. At this point, a divorce would severely damage the Smith Group, and he would never make such a loss-making decision. After all, our marriage had always been a transaction from the start. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out another document. "Do you remember this agreement?" Kevin stared at me in silence, his lack of recognition clear. He had obviously forgotten about it. Back before Linda returned, there were sweet moments between Kevin and me during our days of honeymoon-like affection. Back then, relying on his indulgence, I threw a tantrum and recklessly demanded he draft a marital agreement. If either party commits infidelity, the other party will be entitled to half of their assets. At the time, I saw this agreement as a testament to marital fidelity, proof of Kevin's love for me. But for Kevin, it had likely been nothing more than a trivial ploy to appease me. He signed it carelessly, thinking nothing of it. What he hadn't anticipated was that I would take it seriously. I waved the agreement in front of his face. "Forgot about this? It has your signature on it. It's legally binding. If I take this to court, you'll lose." I should have used this agreement 2 years ago, but I hadn't. I knew Kevin was meticulous, and even if I sued him, without irrefutable evidence, the case might amount to nothing. I wouldn't just fail to claim what was rightfully mine. I might end up with nothing at all. I waited. I waited for the birth of his illegitimate child, the undeniable evidence of his infidelity. I knew Kevin would never willingly hand over half of the Smith family's assets. So, I threw the agreement in his face. "Kneel and beg me. Kneel and beg me, and if I'm satisfied, we can divorce peacefully, and this agreement won't exist." Kevin's expression changed instantly. There was no way he would kneel to me. His pride, his dignity, his backbone, all of it forbade him from humbling himself before me, the very woman he had trained. But against the prospect of losing half of the Smith family's wealth, he couldn't hold out. Slowly, he bent his knees. His once proud posture crumbled as he knelt before me. "Jane, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I shouldn't have betrayed our marriage. Please don't divorce me." I laughed so hard tears came to my eyes. Look at him. Kevin had knelt before me. He had knelt for half of the Smith family's wealth. I stood up slowly, collecting the scattered papers from the floor. Mockingly, I slapped the torn agreement against his face. "Kevin, was it fun keeping me in the dark while you cheated?" He stayed silent, so I struck him again like a crazed woman. You're filthy, disgusting, pathetic. Kevin grew increasingly pitiful, lowering his head as he rasped out, Jane, let out all your anger on me. It's my fault. Let's not divorce, okay? I laughed again. Kevin, do you realize how much you look like a beaten dog right now? His face visibly paled. I closed my eyes, feigning heartbreak, and handed him a pen. Sign it. Let's end this amicably. This is the last shred of dignity I'm offering you. Kevin's hand trembled as he reached for the pen, hesitating before finally signing his name. Jane, I know I've wronged you, but please believe me. I still love you. Kevin's eyes remained fixated on the signed agreement in my hand. Just as I opened it to confirm, Kevin lunged forward, snatching the document right in front of me. He shredded it into pieces suddenly. He regained his composure, his gaze steady and commanding. Jane, I was wrong to keep my affair from you, but you shouldn't use half of the Smith family's assets to threaten me. I'll divorce you, but you'll never get the Smith family's fortune. This was the real Kevin, ruthless and unfeeling, not even trusting the woman who had shared his bed for 3 years. I staggered to my feet, laughter turning manic as my eyes burned red. Ha! You don't believe me. Kevin, you actually don't believe me. Seeing me laugh like a madwoman, Kevin's expression softened slightly. Jane, I raised a hand to stop him. Enough, I'll see you in court. Kevin's gaze darkened instantly. Jane, are you sure you want to take me to court? I laughed bitterly, my voice dripping with despair. Wait for the court summons, Kevin. I'll make you regret this. Confident he would win, Kevin sent his lawyer to negotiate the division of assets. I ignored it and proceeded with the divorce lawsuit. The court session was scheduled swiftly. On the day of the hearing, Kevin didn't appear in person. Instead, he hired the best defense lawyer in the city to represent him. He even texted me, Jane, you'll regret this. Regret? No, the only one who would regret this was Kevin. Kevin didn't realize the agreement he had torn apart wasn't the real one. With undeniable evidence of his infidelity and the agreement we had signed, the court soon reached a verdict. Half of the Smith family's assets were awarded to me. Additionally, because of Kevin's marital misconduct, he had to surrender half of his remaining wealth. Watching Kevin's lawyer frantically call him, I couldn't help but anticipate Kevin's inevitable meltdown. IT would be quite the sight. As expected, Kevin's call came swiftly. Jane, you tricked me? His furious tone carried a mix of anger and disbelief. So he finally realized. Did he really think I was foolish enough to let go of such a large portion of wealth? Did he think I loved him so blindly that I would let his betrayal go unpunished? What was mine, whether he wanted to give it or not, would be mine. Jane, did you know I was cheating all along? After a long silence, Kevin finally asked. Kevin finally realized the truth. But it was too late. I smiled faintly and said, Kevin, this is all your own doing. Don't forget to pick a time. We'll go to the civil affairs office and finalize our divorce. The moment my words landed, Jason appeared behind me holding Jessica. Mommy, Jessica called out in her innocent voice, her big eyes looking up at me. In an instant, Kevin seemed to piece something together. His tone turned frantic with disbelief. Jane, you cheated too. That mixed-race girl, she's your and Jason's illegitimate daughter, isn't she? She has to be. I quickly covered Jessica's ears and shushed her. Then, turning back to Kevin, I denied it. Kevin, Jessica isn't my daughter. And the court has already ruled. Find a time. We'll finalize our divorce. The more I denied it, the more convinced Kevin became. He sneered, his sharp voice full of venom. Jane, you've ruined me. I won't let you get away with this. Just you wait. Kevin appealed the ruling. At the same time, rumors of an affair between Jason and me flooded every media outlet. Do you want me to suppress the news? Jason asked over the phone while I was sorting out the other half of the Smith Group's assets. No need. I replied calmly. Just make sure Jessica is safe and doesn't get photographed. I knew full well that Kevin was behind this. After hanging up, I called my personal assistant. Push Smith Group a bit further. A crumbling tower always needs another one to replace it. The second court hearing, Kevin looked visibly more haggard. yet he still forced a confident demeanor. "Jane, this time you're going to lose," he said, lowering his voice threateningly. "You and your illegitimate daughter won't get away unscathed." Seeing him so pitiful, I couldn't help but smile. "I look forward to seeing your performance today." This time, Kevin came prepared with an arsenal of evidence. They had photos of Jason and me together, even details about Jessica's birth in France. Watching them present one piece of affair evidence after another, I found my smile growing wider. "Your Honor," my lawyer began, "we have evidence proving that Ms. Garcia did not commit adultery during her marriage. Here are 2 reports. One is a DNA test showing that Ms. Garcia and Jessica are not biologically related. The other is Jason's official adoption papers, confirming that Jessica is his legally adopted child. Ms. Garcia and Mr. Jason are merely business partners." As my lawyer laid out the evidence, Kevin and his attorney were left speechless. Kevin never expected Jessica not to be my child. This was the real gift I had prepared for him. To let him think he had a chance to turn things around, only to crush him completely. He had lost everything. The second trial ended swiftly. Kevin lost on the day we went to finalize the divorce at the Civil Affairs office. It also happened to be the day the Smith Group was officially acquired by Garcia Group. I wore a bright red dress and mercilessly mocked him. "Congratulations, Kevin. You've lost everything." Kevin was always meticulous. He was confident I wouldn't discover his affair with Linda. But he forgot that even the most careful person is still human, and humans make mistakes. From the moment I discovered Linda's existence, I had been quietly waiting for this day to arrive. Humiliating Kevin was only secondary. My true goal was to strip him of everything. Without the Smith Group, without the title of CEO, Kevin was nothing, and the Smith Group was far from clean. Otherwise, how could I have uncovered all those skeletons in the closet? Kevin glared at me, his eyes filled with rage. "Jane, your heart is truly ruthless. After all, we were married for 5 years." I chuckled coldly. "Kevin, I told you, those who betray true love deserve to go to hell, and you've been trampling on my love from the very beginning." He had made promises to me, only to rekindle an old flame with another woman. He had toyed with me, over and over. He had crushed my love, making it utterly worthless, as for Linda. I didn't care about her in the slightest. Her self-righteous provocations were laughably insignificant to me. In the end, Kevin didn't love her much either. Otherwise, why would he keep her nameless and burden her with the stigma of being a mistress? All that talk of love was nothing more than a mask for his rotten, selfish nature. Kevin was despicable, filthy, disgusting, and this was all he deserved. Kevin and Linda eventually got together. However, their days were filled with endless arguments and mutual disdain. Later, I heard that their bickering led to a car accident, killing them both. It was almost poetic. Kevin's life ending in chaos, just as he had lived it. But none of that had anything to do with me anymore. Back at the villa, the sound of running water from the bathroom caught my attention. I stared at the bathroom door for a moment, then lay on the bed, positioning myself just right to see the door. Jason emerged from the bathroom, a towel loosely wrapped around his waist. He noticed my gaze immediately. He strode over quickly, kneeling by my side, and without hesitation, pressed his sharp nose against my neck, trailing kisses up and down. "BB," his kisses were fervent, his warm breath brushing against my skin and seemingly igniting me from within. I smiled faintly, running my fingers through his damp hair. Did Jessica fall asleep? His response was muffled, his dazzling green eyes reflecting a mix of passion and surrender. I ruffled his hair as if he were a puppy and gestured for him to climb onto the bed. As I traced his sharp features, I suddenly felt the urge to touch his cheek. Before I could lift my hand, he leaned down on his own, letting his lips travel from my fingertips down to my heart. With every kiss, he whispered in his deep, affectionate voice, "BB." Extra chapter. Before meeting Jane, Jason never understood the concept of love at first sight. After meeting her, he only wanted to be the devoted servant of her radiance. For the first 25 years of his life, Jason lived by the rules. As the eldest son of a prominent family, the weight of responsibility had been placed on his shoulders from a young age, leaving him no room for freedom or indulgence. He was bound by customs and etiquette, like a silkworm being tightly wrapped in its own cocoon, until one day, on the streets of Paris, he saw Jane, dressed in a fiery red dress. Amidst a sea of foreign faces, her distinctly Eastern beauty stood out so boldly, so dazzlingly. She was like a rose, a gem, a flame, captivating and vibrant. The elegant rose glanced at him, seemingly unintentionally, and that was all it took. The gentle Parisian breeze and Jason's heart surrendered simultaneously. It wasn't difficult for him to uncover information about her. A cheating husband, an ambitious mistress, and a woman left shattered yet unbroken. But the proud Rose refused to bow her head. She had her own plans, to make her deceitful husband lose everything, to see him ruined. She allowed Jason to approach her with calculated purpose, using his proximity for her company's gain. Even though reason told him she was a dangerous woman, he couldn't resist. He was utterly captivated, falling deeper and deeper under her spell. He longed to be her lover on the streets of Paris, to hold her beneath the Eiffel Tower, to walk hand in hand along the Seine. How he yearned for her. Goddess Venus, please bless me. He silently prayed. It seemed the heavens heard the plea of their devotee, granting his wish. He watched as the child he had adopted was cradled in her arms. For the first time, his bound heart felt liberated, fulfilled. But his greedy heart wasn't satisfied. It craved more. He brought his daughter and chased her back to her homeland, to Hong Kong, the city where he was born and raised. There, he revealed his true identity and confessed his feelings, but the cold and aloof Rose remained unmoved. She only saw him as a tool. Still, he refused to give up. Taking a step back, he used her soft spot for Jessica to stay close to her. After turning to the country, she continued to feign civility with her cheating husband. Yet behind the scenes, she had already extended her influence into the Smith group, becoming the commanding Ms. Garcia. Jason admired her determination and decisiveness. Even if all of this had been shaped by another man, he still cherished every part of her. Though she and her husband rarely saw each other, that man would never know the truth. Her business trips were merely an excuse to visit Hong Kong. Every day, Jason held Jessica in his arms, waiting like a hopeful servant, yearning for her return. Thankfully, she eventually divorced that unfaithful husband. But Jason knew deep down that she wouldn't step into another marriage. She would never choose him, and yet, he didn't care. And no matter how many people came into Jane's life, as long as Jessica was there, he would always be her one and only exception, her only one. Jason was willing to be forever beneath her reign, devoted to Jane, the queen of his heart.